Houston and DC did the business this week in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, both teams advancing to the semifinals, Shep.
Good wins, but Greg, can they get the job done in Major League Soccer?
Well, we'll discuss that and more next on Extra Time. Welcome back to MLS Headquarters, everybody. I'm your host, Greg Lawless, alongside Shep Messing, and this is the second in a four-part series previewing the 2008 season. Today, we'll be talking about Supporters Shield winners DC United, the Chicago Fire and Cuauhtemoc Blanco, a rejuvenated Colorado Rapids, and the two-time defending champions, Houston Dynamo. Shep, let's start off with DC United. 2007 Supporters Shield winners, but they stumbled in the playoffs, losing to the Chicago Fire, and immediately in the offseason, they made a ton of changes. The biggest one, they got rid of Christian Gomez, shipped him off to Colorado, and brought in Argentine international Marcelo Gallardo. Another big change they made, they brought in Gonzalo Martinez, a Colombian center back.
Greg, I think too many changes. Remember, for this DC United team, their method of operation has always been keep everybody, tweak it with one or two players. They have made dramatic changes. You talked about the loss of Gomez, Gallardo coming in. I'm not happy with all the changes they've made.
Well, still, though, DC United has an incredible attack, and you still have Luciano Emilio, who scored 20 goals last year. You have Fred out on the flank, who was sort of a revelation getting in there. And if Gallardo pans out, this attack could be just as robust as it was last year.
Greg, there was no question the strength of this team is in the attacking third of the field. And you mentioned the players. What DC United has always done well in the attacking third, running off the ball, a great understanding, a great utilization of space. I don't know if they'll still be able to do it without Christian Gomez, but those guys, Fred, Emilio, Gallardo, Ben Olsen getting forward, utilizing the width of the field, that'll be the strength.
Well, they have a busy schedule this year because they're in Superliga, the Champions Cup, plus the season, and the U.S. Open Cup, so their depth is also going to be a question. They also brought in some defenders, Gonzalo Peralta and Gonzalo Martinez. One's a Colombian, one's an Argentine, and these two, I think, will shore up some of the issues they've had in the center back. But there are some weaknesses in this team, and the major weakness for this team, looking at it just on face value, is too many changes.
I agree. I mean, you've got Zach Wells in goal, new goalkeeper. And age, I think, is a factor. You know, is Jaime Moreno still going to be the player he has been over the course of history? Gallardo, we could say he's a strength or he's a weakness. I mean, he really didn't play.
Depending on what he does. Right?
Didn't play last year in France for Paris Saint-Germain. So what Gallardo are they getting? Their strength, well, it also could be the weakness.
Yeah, well, the player who will probably bring it all together is Ben Olsen, who I think is the key player for DC this year. He's injured early on in the season, but when he comes back, this is their leader. This is their heart and soul.
I think Ben Olsen, last year for DC United, was their unsung most valuable player. If Ben Olsen is healthy, he'll play wide right in the midfield, but he'll track back, he'll defend, he'll get forward. His work rate, his energy, that will allow Gallardo maybe not to sit so deep in the midfield. I think a lot rests on Ben Olsen.
All right, so Shep, DC United will win MLS Cup
if Gallardo becomes the player he used to be for the Argentine national team and Jaime Moreno finds the fountain of youth.
Well, lots of changes in the nation's capital, but DC United is still DC United, and they're going to be very tough to beat in 2008. The Chicago Fire were arguably the best team in MLS for the second half of the season in 2007. They pushed into the playoffs and made it in the last day, and then beat DC United in the first round in a very exciting series. In the offseason, though, lots of changes. They lost their head coach, Juan Carlos Osorio. They also lost their heart and soul captain, Chris Armas. Dennis Hamlet came in as the new coach, and they still have Cuauhtemoc Blanco, who energized them when he finally arrived in Chicago.
Well, Greg, you talk about a team in transition. I'm always a little bit leery whenever you have a change in coaches. That's the number one spot. He reflects the character of the team. Have to see how Dennis Hamlet will do, but it's a good place to start when you have Blanco.
It certainly is. Cuauhtemoc Blanco is the biggest strength on the Chicago Fire side. When he arrived in 2007, he energized his team, he scored goals, he set up all of his teammates. Now, the question in 2008 is, are those teammates ready to help him out a little bit more? Because he's a player who demands that his teammates are very, very strong and also urging to get those wins. He has a huge core of forwards. He's got Chris Rolfe. Andy Herron is back in Chicago. Patrick Nyako, the heralded draftee. They also brought in Tomasz Frankowski, a Polish international who scored a lot of goals in Poland, but not much outside of his own home country.
Well, Greg, I agree. The strength of the team starts on the shoulders of Blanco, magnificent. And they also have some good young players who have never, in my mind, lived up to the great expectations. I think they can be very good players, but the likes of Justin Mapp and Chris Rolfe, injuries, they've never done it consistently.
And Chad Barrett as well. Now, one of the things that brings up the weaknesses of Chicago is when you think about Wilman Conde. The Colombian has already announced that he wants to leave Chicago and move to New York to play for Juan Carlos Osorio, his coach down at Millonarios in Colombia, who brought him to Chicago. And this just raises all sorts of questions for Dennis Hamlet, the new coach. Is this team ready to play for him?
Yeah, we're going to find out quickly. And I think Conde, from what I know, is the consummate professional. So he has voiced his opinion in public, but I think he'll still go out on the field and play. It is something Dennis Hamlet has to deal with. When you play three in the back, Conde is a critical guy in the central part of the defense. But it also, as you know, Greg, how are the wide midfielders going to do? Are they going to track back? Are they going to defend when you have three in the back? They have to.
Now, Shep, the Chicago Fire will win MLS Cup
if Blanco remains magnificent from the beginning of the year to MLS Cup, and if one of the big guys up front, maybe Frankowski, pours in a ton of goals.
Somebody has to start scoring for the Chicago Fire, but if Blanco can get on fire himself, they might make the playoffs. The Colorado Rapids missed the playoffs in 2007, which meant in the offseason they had to do something, and they did. They went and got Christian Gomez, who was with DC United, and the attacking, fun, exciting center midfielder that Colorado really has lacked.
Greg, good for Colorado. They spent the money, took the checkbook out. They got a great player, former MVP in Major League Soccer.
Well, this brings up their strength. Their biggest strength in 2008 will be the midfield. You've got Colin Clark, the young player who was a revelation on the left flank in 2007. You still have Terry Cook out on the right flank, arguably the second best server of balls from the right flank after David Beckham. And Pablo Mastroeni, the World Cup veteran, he's still in there. And you bring in Christian Gomez. It's a great midfield.
I'd make the argument that this could be, if healthy and playing well, the best midfield in Major League Soccer. I love the attacking ability of Christian Gomez. I love the wide players you talked about, Clark and Terry Cook. And I like Pablo Mastroeni sitting back deep in the midfield. They're strong. I also like Buna Kandula in goal.
But, Shep, there are questions about the people in front of him. The defense, the backline for Colorado is not really that strong. Colorado did bring in Jose Borsiaga Jr., a definite improvement on the left side, but with Facundo Orpen and Mike Petke in the middle and lots of question marks on the right flank, it's just not there.
Greg, I worry about that back four in front of Buna, and I worry about their lack of speed. I think people are going to get behind them. But I also worry about who's up front? Who's going to score goals for Colorado?
Well, you do have Jovan Karofsky still in there, but Connor Casey is going to be the key. He might be the key player for the team this year. Connor Casey, a big knockdown sort of target forward. This year, though, he has to start scoring goals. He has to score 10 or 12 goals this year if they're going to have any chance of making the playoffs.
Greg, I think he's a key player, but I think a key element is how he links up with Christian Gomez, the chemistry. Christian Gomez is going to be the guy tucked in behind him who's got to serve him the ball.
Well, chemistry, always important for sure, and they went over and trained at the Arsenal training facility in London and had a great session over there during the preseason. That should help their chemistry. But Colorado will win the MLS Cup if
they go out and sign Mexican international Jared Borghetti, and if it's Buna time all the time.
Well, Buna Kundul, Buna time. He does have to be on all the time if they're going to have any chance. Colorado, a lot of transition in the offseason. We'll see if it pans out for them come 2008. But for these preview shows, we're also touring around Major League Soccer's headquarters, and right now we're in Commissioner Don Garber's office.
Sophisticated but understated.
In winning the last two MLS Cups, the Houston Dynamo have made minor adjustments each year, bringing in a player here, maybe letting a player go. In this offseason, they lost several important players. They lost Ryan Cochran in the expansion draft to the San Jose Earthquakes. They also lost Joseph Nguyen and Nate Jakwa, a couple of forwards who transferred to teams in Austria. But Shep, really, the Houston Dynamo, the core is still there, especially going up the spine with Pat Onstad in goal, Eddie Robinson as center back, Ricardo Clark and Dwayne De Rosario, and then Brian Ching up top.
Greg, I don't think there's any question about it. Most teams in Major League Soccer would trade the roster today for Houston's roster. You talked about the spine of the team. I like the wide players as well. Barrett in the back, Weibel on the other side. You've got Brad Davis in the midfield wide. You've got Mullen wide. You've got Holden. I don't even know if he could get a place in the team. So this is a very solid team.
And they're going to need a lot of those players because they have lots of games this summer. They're in the Champions Cup right now. The regular season will start. There's Superliga, the U.S. Open Cup. So they have a lot of games. But there are some weaknesses in this team. Maybe for the first time we see weaknesses in Houston. Question is, who's going to score the goals up top? Brian Ching, obviously a U.S. international. They have Chris Wondolowski and Kyle Brown. And the other weakness maybe is who replaces Ryan Cochran.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. We saw in the preseason they gave up a ton of goals when Robinson was out and Boswell was teamed up with Ianni in the central part of the defense. Does Boswell recapture the form that he had in DC United? And who can augment the production of Brian Ching up front?
Well, the key will be Eddie Robinson. He's a veteran. He's a best 11 player. He's a guy who's going to have to bring his partner in the center back and raise their game.
Well, I think you're right, and Robinson has the whole field in front of him. Again, I think Pat Onstad, the best goalkeeper in the league, Robinson, the general in the central part of the defense, he's a key guy for them.
Certainly is, and a lot of veteran leadership on this team as well. We didn't even mention Richard Mulrooney, who can slide in almost anywhere on the field. But Shep, the Houston Dynamo will win MLS Cup again if
Brian Ching stays healthy, plays in every game, scores a ton of goals, and they acquire a second forward that can produce.
Well, Dominic Kinnear always seems to make a little adjustment mid-season that really helps the team. I expect Houston to get easily back into the playoffs and maybe back to MLS Cup. Well, Shep, let's continue with our predictions for how these teams are going to finish in 2008. I've noticed that you put DC in 4th place.
Greg, I do have DC in 4th place in the East. Too many changes. I have Chicago coming in 5th place in the East. I don't think there's enough that Blanco has surrounding him. In the West, I have Colorado coming in 6th place. Christian Gomez is great, but not enough talent around him. And I have Houston coming in 2nd place.
Well, I actually give DC credit a little bit more than you do. I put them at 2nd place. I think some of those changes are really going to pan out for them. Chicago, I agree. It's Blanco and very little up top to score the goals. Out west, Houston in 3rd place. They always seem to sort of sneak in there, and then they cause problems in the playoffs. And Colorado, just like you, I put them at 6th place. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the show, but you can email us at extratime@mlsnet.com. Look out for the next preview, which will be next Wednesday. Join us then, and Shep and I will be here to kick it around.